Welcome to a very special anniversary celebration. My name is Jim Lane. I'm the mayor of Scottsdale, and I'm also the chair for the Maricopa Association of Governments, or MAG, as we're commonly referred to. This is a very substantial day and a very important day when you think about what the consequences have been over the last 30 years to the implementation of this great program. And it's incredible, really, and probably unquantifiable as to the kinds of things that have actually occurred to the benefit of our entire public safety system, to people's lives, and to the reassurance of receiving emergency services through a system that is solid and consistently able to distribute that information and to locate those kinds of problems. You know, to illustrate a little bit of what we have here, let me just talk about some of the scenarios that we probably all have lived through, or maybe at least have contemplated happening to us. You're at home, you hear a glass break. You're in a mall and suddenly your wife collapses to the ground. You're driving through your neighborhood and you see smoke coming from your next door neighbor's house. All three of these scenarios, the next actions now are clear. You grab a phone and you quickly tap out 911. It may be hard for those under 30, maybe even 40, to appreciate what it was like when you had to dial, you had to find a phone, get to a phone, you had to remember a specific number, and you had to, in order to be able to reach emergency services, police, fire, and emergency medical services. To think about it, in 1985, when we're with the 30-year anniversary we're celebrating right now, the internet was still new, very new, and frankly wasn't anything like what you might expect it to be today. Personal computers were relatively new on the market, and it was quite a transition for a lot of folks. And it too, those two, were not anything like what you see even today. And mobile phones, excuse me, mobile phones were really something that were mobile only by virtue of they were in your car. I mean, you weren't walking around with them. I mean, you couldn't hardly just even carry the heat sink that normally was in our trunk of our car or in the back seat of your pickup. And the only people that could actually use them and justify them, their cost, were businesses where the efficiency that they brought were able to really be able to make their products and make their operations more cost effective in the long run. These things typically cost $3,000, $3,000 to $4,000 installed, and I remember from my superintendents, their bills would typically be over $1,000 a month. So if you're thinking about those new plans that Verizon or Sprint or anybody's got out there, you can make those comparisons, and they might even want to try to do that. You know, many of us here are certainly on the north side of 30 years old, and we remember as kids, certainly, when we had stickers on the phone. Somebody was just talking a little bit about that. There was one alternative to 911. Let's make sure everybody gets a sticker on their phone, which would just give you a number that no one would ever commit to memory on the just off chance that when an emergency occurred, you'd remember it off the top of your head, number one. And frankly, you'd have to remember what locale you were in. So it was not even somewhat, it wasn't convenient in that sense. So you had to know the actual number, and there was no automated location finders or anything on that line. As I said before, too, you had to find a phone or a pay phone or something like that. Of course, there's some people that probably don't even know what a pay phone is anymore. They've sort of exited stage right. Many people do not know the history of 911 in the region. It was a collaborative effort that actually began closer to 40 years ago when a group of people interested in public safety met at MAG to discuss the idea of putting 911 system together. Looking at the expense and the numerous city boundaries involved, it seemed that there was no way one entity could put it together. Voila, that's where MAG came in. MAG was the organizer that could reach across jurisdictional boundaries and attract participation from different agencies. In 1978, a MAG 911 Technical Advisor Committee was formed to review the process for implementing a 911 system in Maricopa County. Members included representatives from the majority of public safety agencies in the region. And I think we have some of those initial committee members celebrating with us today, and we'll introduce them in just a few minutes. MAG quickly approached the Arizona Corporation Commission regarding the funding of 911. That's always the magical issue of funding. Where is the money going to come from to put such an innovative and thought-provoking kind of application into reality? It wasn't until in 1982, following a case involving Mountain Bell refunds, that $4.6 million became available to purchase and install 911 systems throughout Arizona. Sounds like a virtual bargain if I can, in today's dollars, of course, at $4.6 million. It'd probably be in billions at this point in time. In 1983, the then Governor Bruce Babbitt signed Senate Bill 1358, which created the Emergency Telecommunications Services Revolving Fund. This fund, which gets its revenue from an excise tax on telephone service, is used for operating costs of 911 service in Arizona. Because of the size of the region, because of individual local governments know best how to dispatch their calls, the Technical Advisory Committee elected to go with a distributive rather than a centralized answering system, and to use technology to route the calls to the proper jurisdictions. Now, I was just talking to Jim, one of the critical components in all of this just a little while ago, and that in and of itself was a stunning feat, to be able to bring all of those locales together and make it distributed back. With the technology that was available then, and frankly the bandwidth and other factors of technology that we now take for granted, it was nearly miraculous. The official rollover to 911 in Maricopa County took place on September 9th, 1985. In 1989, the city of Phoenix was designated as the contract agent for the system. This too was a great barrier to overcome. They were altogether in the past, certainly maybe more pronounced than they are today, turf battles among municipalities and the thinking about who's going to control it, who's going to really call us all together with one system, and with that level of trust that we would put into that. And that was done as well. In 1985, Maricopa region had 1.8 million people and 1.1 million telephone access lines. And within a year, now this is something also, it's a transition of the population and just to getting to know it. But within 1 year, 40% of the telephone calls answering at the Phoenix Police Department came through the 911 system. If you were to make comparisons with today, where we have over 4 million people in the same geographic area, we now have 4.25 million telephone access lines, and 66% of them are cell phones. So we now have an added element that had to be brought into the system as well, and that occurred in later years. Last year, 2.8 million calls were answered in the Maricopa region by the 911 call takers. And from the beginning, MAG 911 system enabled call takers to identify the phone number of the caller and determine the address from which the call originated. In 1997, TDD capability, which stands for Telephone Device for the Deaf, was integrated into the system so that those with hearing impairments could also use the 911 system. In January 2005, Community Emergency Notification System, or SENSE, went live. SENSE is a reverse 911 system used to notify the public during an emergency. It uses the 911 database to contact residents and tell them about emergencies and what they might be able to do to protect themselves. In November 2005, the capability of tracking mobile or wireless calls was implemented. So it's a number of years later, 20 years later, allowing dispatchers to know the location of the emergency caller using a cell phone. Another significant MAG effort took place in 2012. To increase the reliability and capacity of the 911 network, MAG arranged to use the fiber owned by cities through the MAG Regional Community Network to carry 911 calls. One more innovative approach, using technology in public safety applications while saving residents money by further utilizing an asset that the taxpayers had already purchased. The result of these cooperative efforts is a critical life-saving service. When seconds count, the MAG 911 system is there to bring together police, fire, and medical assistance to residents in need. At this time, I'd like to recognize those in attendance who either play a current role in our police and fire efforts or a formal role in bringing 911 service to the Valley. I'd like to begin by my introductions by recognizing some of the people who were here when the system was born 30 years ago and who play a major role in its implementation. First, we have Mary Ann Fortunas, who currently serves as Deputy Director of Phoenix Planning and Development Department. Mary Ann helped to staff the 911 committee in its early days and wrote the first annual report that included the history of 911 implementation. Mary Ann's right here in front of me. Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Second, I would like to introduce Tom Sawyer, who served as an Assistant Chief for the Phoenix Fire Department when the 911 system was implemented and installed in Maricopa County. Tom was only the second person to chair the 911 Oversight Committee right after Phoenix Police Chief Dennis Garrett, who was unfortunately not able to be here with us today, but Tom's right here in front of us. Thank you very much, Tom. Next, I'd like to introduce Dennis Smith, who serves as our current Executive Director of the Maricopa Association of Governments, which still oversees the system through the 911 Oversight Committee and Public Safety Answering Point Managers, or PSAP managers. Dennis was a key player in the early 80s, advocating for a 911 system for the region. He helped to pull together the technical expertise needed to implementation and spearheading efforts to get regional buy-in and funding for this system. Dennis is right here in front of me. Pardon me. Also want to recognize Jim Wortham, here with his wife, Virginia. Jim, technical and management expertise were a driving force in the establishment of 911. He served as a computer service administrator for the Phoenix Fire Department, and he served as chair of the PSAP Managers Technical Subcommittee. Jim received a Distinguished Service Award in 2001 for his service to the region. Jim's right here in front of me. Jim, thank you. Still active, as he tells me, and working at it. So thank you. We also have with us today Valerie Day, who's on the staff right now with MAG, but also who staffs the 911 committee on a continuing basis yet today. Yes, Valerie. Others we would like to recognize for their support this morning are Surprise Police Chief Terry Young, Tolleson Police Chief Larry Rodriguez, Tolleson Fire Department Chief George Good, Glendale Assistant Fire Chief Elio Pampa, Mesa Fire and Medical Department Assistant Fire Chief Corey Hayes, and State 911 Administrator Barbara Yeager. There it is. I know we have another of other members of the MAG 911 Oversight Committee and PSAP managers in attendance, as well as other first responders. Could you please hold up your hand so that we may be able to recognize you for your service? Thank you. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Liz Graber, who serves as the 911 administrator for Maricopa Region and the city of Phoenix. Liz brings her own special institutional knowledge to the table. In 1985, she was a young call taker who had worked for the city of Mesa for 2 years. Liz was actually one of those call takers who was answering the phones on September 9th, 1985, when the system rolled over from the previous 7-digit phone number to the 3-digit 911 system. Liz?
I began my service in public safety communications several years, as Marilyn pointed out, before 911 was available. So every call we took, we had no idea where the caller was. We had to get that information from them. So we were trained on how to ask the caller, if they didn't know the address, could they see landmarks or addresses outside on buildings, or anything we could use to help us get the officers, firefighters, and medical assistants they needed. A coworker of mine took a call before 911 that was a drowning call that involved a child. The call taker immediately began giving CPR instructions, but the caller didn't know where they were at. The family was visiting from out of town, and no one in the house had the address of the home. The call taker continued to give CPR instructions while others in the house frantically looked for the address. Sadly, there was a long delay on this call. This tragic call and others were submitted to elected officials to convince them to bring 911 to the Valley. In 1985, I recall how anxious we all were for the 911 system to go live. Most of the calls that came in on that September day were people calling to see if 911 really worked. And it did. Our jobs and how we did them forever changed that day because of 911. I remember answering a call where no one was speaking, but all I could hear was tapping. Since the caller had dialed 911, I was able to send them help immediately. As it turns out, the caller could barely breathe and was unable to speak. Their lives were saved that day because of 911. Millions of emergency calls happen every year here in the Valley. In 2014, as the mayor said, 2.8 million 911 calls were made and answered by the 1,100 dedicated personnel that work in 911 centers throughout the Maricopa region. Phoenix PD alone handled 1.1 million of those calls. The 911 community looks to the future with great anticipation. It's time to bring 911 to the digital age. Citizens can call 911, but they should be able to reach out on other platforms. Text messaging, vehicle crash notifications are a few examples. These will be the next big changes for 911. We are committed to work with the technology and telecommunications industry, elected officials, and community leaders to achieve this goal. Our goal today is the same as it was in 1985, to save lives. I now would like to introduce you to Jesse Cooper with the Phoenix Police Department. Jesse oversees the Phoenix Police Communication Bureau. Jesse?
Thank you, Liz. The emergency 911 system is a remarkable instrument for the public to reach law enforcement, fire, and emergency medical services. The men and women who answer those calls are an essential and valued part of that system. While the job can be stressful, difficult, and challenging at times, the reward of helping citizens during their most challenging and trying times can be fulfilling. The 911 operators who work 24/7 to answer those calls are amazing individuals who often go unnoticed, but they are always there ready for the public's call. Agencies across the Valley often struggle to recruit and retain qualified individuals who are willing to accept this unique job challenge. The process to apply, test, and become hired in this profession is extremely demanding. Even after being hired in the classroom, there's on-the-job training, experience, and knowledge that has to be gained, and that is even more demanding. However, for those who seek this exciting and challenging profession, the professional and personal benefits can be incredible. Agencies are continuously seeking to hire and fill these vacancies. Phoenix is not unique. It's across the state of Arizona, and particularly in our region, we're looking for those qualified individuals. If anybody thinks they're a good fit for this profession, I would encourage them to apply and accept the challenge of this noble profession. There are tough days. There's plenty of people here who are currently doing the job, who've done the job in the past. I think you can ask them. There's some hard days in the job. But the assistance they provide the public is beyond measure, and the good that they do every single day. The emergency 911 system is only as good as the technology and the people that support it. As technology continues to expand our capabilities, we will continue to need the next generation of personnel to answer those 911 calls. As we celebrate 30 years of 911 in the Maricopa region, we just ask that you consider those that are behind the scenes supporting the critical service and encourage you to explore the possibilities if you're interested in this exciting profession. And that wraps up our conference. I just want to thank you and open up for any questions. Mayor Lane and Ms. Graber are available for questions. Thank you.
We said it all.